and welcome to the Service Operations Podcast. I am your host, 𝗲𝗵𝗂𝗶𝗵. Our guests are from different industries and functions. They will share their experience, strategies, and the changing landscape to help you take the service operations of your business to the next level. Hi Salil, it's so nice to have you on this podcast. I'm looking forward to a very interesting conversation with you. For a brief introduction, Salil has over 20 years of work experience in banking, consulting, and the insurance space. And his core area of expertise is digital products and analytics. Over to you, Salil. Tell us more about your work.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am. Currently, I'm working with, I just joined, in fact, Pramerica Life Insurance as the Chief Digital and Technology Officer, basically building out a stack for digital tech and analytics there. Prior to that, for the last almost 20 years, worked about 15 years in ICICI Bank and about 5 years in Experian on the consulting side, consulting to banks. ICICI was more about the first 10 years into analytics, and I think a lot of interesting things happened so joined the bank about 2003. So a lot of interesting things that the bank has done as always, and built out scale in a wonderful way. So those 10 years worked in analytics across different businesses, across consumer and SME banking primarily, and then moved over from analytics within ICICI only to mobile payments and products, and looking at digital banking, revamping the app, and a lot of other interesting work that happened there. So after about 15 years, decided to figure out what else is happening outside of India, and that's why I was keen to explore an opportunity in the region and joined Experian, which was about consulting for banks, helping them on the analytics, decisioning, and digitization of their processes. And eventually moved to Singapore, worked with banks in Southeast Asia, Australia, China primarily. And then was also heading the Analytics Center of Excellence for Experian across APAC, where we essentially tried to ensure that we modernize our stack and create products for customers, as also go out and commercialize for clients across. So I think that was the interesting phase. So it was an interesting stint compared to working within a bank and then going back to sell to banks. Interesting learnings about how do you create credibility within a couple of hours of conversation and ensure that the other person feels comfortable. You're not here to just sell, and you're here to actually help them succeed. So I think that was the interesting one. And now this opportunities come up. Lots of opportunity in the Indian insurance space, and that's why I'm here. Back to India now, based in Gurgaon. So over to you.
So interesting journey. See, while you're telling us what you have done, it's like a very large expanse, and lots would have changed from when you started, like say in 2003, and then that exponential growth, and then using data as your raw material to take things forward. So just tell us what has been the situation when you started till maybe when you left, because it was a long time. So the usage of data, and I mean, how are we really doing it?
Yeah, so I think it's all been driven around what's been happening for the customer. How is the customer interacting with the various financial services organizations? I think the big one, at least in the Indian industry, would have started off in the early to mid 90s, when we had introduction of ATMs happening, a lot of entry of private banks, and of course introduction of internet banking. And then we saw that so there, if you ask me, and this is before I started working, but at least from whatever we learned, there was a lot of physical paper-based approval processes, obviously, because that's the way information was coming in. That's how you're interacting with new customers as you come in to the system. And of course, then you had core banking systems coming up, centralization of information, single data stacks coming out, where you could have a universal view of all customer data in one place for the banks. And I think that was a big one that happened. And that actually led the way to a lot of analytics teams also coming up. Effectively, once the technology solved the problem of ensuring that the data is together, That's when the analytics team was born. In fact, late 90s is when the analytics team started in ICICI Bank.
Yeah.
It was possibly one of the top first 15 members. I mean, we are a 12 to 13 member unit when I joined it, and I think today I think ICICI has about 200 plus analytics team members. So the way it changed is what actually happened is first feasibility of doing the analysis itself. Second, what you would end up analyzing also changed. What questions you could answer have changed. In 2003, I think the basic problem that we were trying to solve then was how you can simplify life for employees. So a lot of the analytics was being done when for how can we simplify for employees so that we can go and scale, because that's the time,
Yeah.
first time you had consumer banking really exponentially growing,
Yeah.
ICICI and a couple of other banks also growing up. So when I say simplifying for employees, effectively, if you have a credit scoring model for lending or cards or any other product that you're considering in the credit space, what it was essentially doing was essentially ensuring that the same set of people can take a good quality decision for a larger portfolio of customers. If I'm a credit manager, if I was taking decisions by going through every detail of every application, maybe I was doing 15 applications a day. But if I have a credit score being generated, suddenly I just need to look at the cases which are the 10% cases which are coming in the gray area, because the others are being classified as white, which is accept or clear rejects, right? So I don't need to spend time there, which means that I have increased my productivity by 10 times. So then I can do 150 applications a day. And if I can get better at decisioning, then I'm only looking at the specific cases where I can go into detail, maybe ask for more information from the customer, engage with the customers better. So I think that's where a lot of action started happening. That this is one example of modeling or credit risk scoring. The other stuff that also happened maybe in the mid of 2000s was more around how we can start tracking every part of the process. Once the application comes in, what do you end up doing? So a lot of reporting around how we are utilizing our customers' data, and also how we are planning out our employees' time to actually get it done, whether it's customer service, whether it's sales, whether it's credit, whether it's operations. So you can actually track a lot of that information because it's available now. You have timestamps of when did this file or case move from one stage to another. So I think that's where it was playing out. Then effectively, as I've been saying, that you started seeing a movement of a large set of customers about late 2000s and early 2010, when a lot of internet usage started increasing. Then there was a lot of action around customer facing analytics that started playing out, because effectively, if you have channels where customers can start interacting with directly with you, then the nature of analytics can also change. If I look at very simple examples, so ICICI ended up making a cross-sell model, cross-sell strategies back in 2004
Yeah.
and 5. And then it's been obviously getting improved with every iteration that's been happening, and basis the learning that's coming in. So at that time, when you would have a cross-sell model suggesting that this customer needs to get an offer, it won't directly go to the customer. Again, we were solving for employees at that time, if you ask me. So it
Yeah.
will be shown to the employee when the call center executive is speaking to the customer. It's an inbound customer service call, or you're making an outbound call. You have the clear details of the offer. You're communicating that, making life easy for the customer, for the call center executive also, and for the customer also. You're creating convenience, because then you're telling them about the specific offer. You're not doing a blank. I mean, you're not doing a generic call and asking whether you want something. So that's the way it was being approached. Even when the customers were walking into the branches, you will have those offers popping up on the screen in the branches. That's again in early 2000s to late 2000s when we were seeing this happen. Now, this started changing when you had a lot more usage of digital channels, whether it's internet, then effectively a lot of explosion on usage of mobile phones started off after Android came in, and after the Android phones became cheaper in India and they started growing in terms of usage. That's mid 2010s. So that's when you started seeing a lot of offers being shown on display to the customer, and actually you saw some traction in terms of conversions, because display was already is happening, but you didn't have a lot of traffic. So I think that's where the transition has happened. That it's been a lot of analytics, at least in the financial services side, was being used for productivity increases, whether it's credit, whether it's modeling, predictive analytics, descriptive analytics, and then moving on to the customer side. Now we see a lot of action in the last 5 to 7 years around how we can simplify the customer interactions also, whether it's through bots, etc. Obviously, the bots still need human assistance because they can't solve for all problems at present. But that's where we are seeing more action happening right now. That's where the whole differentiation game is being played out. This discussion about personalization has been happening. The segment of one has been happening for about a couple of decades now. But yeah, there's still a lot of opportunity to personalize further for the
Yeah.
customers, and that's where analytics can play a role.
Yeah. What you're saying is that, see, initially, even the data or the information that came from customers, as in applications or account opening forms, are very non standardized. So, I think what has happened is that there's been a lot of parallel progress in various areas. So, just as the channels for use of for the customer have increased, like, now there's mobile banking, internet banking, and that gives a lot of proper information, which otherwise was just demographics. And I think there's a lot of standardization in terms of the documents or information that we take from the customer. Like the PAN is a standard number now, I mean, once you have that, then you get a lot of, you're able to at least put together the customer's interactions in
Yeah,
one place. And the
absolutely.
Aadhaar, I'm not
Absolutely,
very
that's been
sure.
a that's been a big one, big transformation for the country.
Yeah, and I think even mobile number, because
Yeah, yeah.
you're able to actually pick up a lot of information. But see, this employee portion and this internal use of data, of course, has been, I mean, it's been used by most companies, and also I think technology has also moved in that direction. So there are lots of things that have happened. But so just tell me now that we are so data oriented, okay, what happens to the human interactions, and that the person in the data.
Sure, sure. I think a great question, because a lot of times you end up doing a. So if I've understood you correctly, what you're saying is, uh, is data enough to take a call? How do we link data to actually real life problems?
Yeah,
And actually, that's a valid one, because a lot of times you end up looking at analysis and saying that, yeah, we've done this, and we've got this table, we've got this analysis, this is the insight, and let's go ahead. A lot of times, if you ask me, what questions we ask and what assumptions we are making when we are using the data is the big one to solve for. And I think any analysis that whether I'm starting off, or any other person who's worked in the domain is starting off, you always start off with the basic questions as to how have we taken out the data, what does this data imply. When I say that, okay, a particular customer has has maybe expressed interest in this product, how has that been captured? Has that been captured by the customer? Has that been captured by a process where somebody speaking to the customer has captured it? And how can we be sure that that's something of real interest? Whether the customer is, a lot of times you get data about customers' demographics. So is that data document backed? Because, or it was the customer in a hurry and they just wanted to go to the next part of the form and they've just filled up anything. So typically you'll have the initial, the top drop downs being selected, and because you made a very long form. So a lot of those things may be happening. So assumptions of what you are making, whether the data is reliable or not, I think that's where the whole story has to start. And you need to check those assumptions. And then second thing that comes out is, what is the question? What are we looking in this analysis for? So what's the purpose of doing this? So am I trying to figure out how can I improve my efficiency of say customers who are calling me, and I want to figure out what can I do in terms of, there are a couple of things that I can do. So let's take an example of a call center. When a customer is calling in, what can I do with that information? I can look at it in the form that, what are the customers calling in for? That could be the question that we're trying to answer.
yeah,
The other question that we're trying to answer is, which customers may be looking for help in a more detailed manner. So where do we need to call up again and actually understand it better? So that's a next level question that you're coming to actually solve the core problem for which the customer called. Then it becomes another opportunity could be that, yeah, these customers are happy. So what can I do for them in terms of providing some products that they may be right for them. So then it comes into a service to sales kind of a scenario. So I think that's where the questions should lead to the analysis, and that's when the analysis can give you a lot of ideas. So that's one way of doing it, so questioning it. The other way is, maybe we have some hypothesis. We've seen something happen in real life. So if you've gone for a branch visit or if you've gone for a customer interaction, and then you come back with some information that, okay, this customer told me that we didn't want this banking product and I have some issues here, and that's why I want to maybe return the product or close down the product with you. And if that's the case, then what can we do and investigate back? So you come back with a hypothesis that, okay, customers who are coming in from this channel have given this feedback. So can we test it out at a larger scale on the entire population and then come back with feedback? So I think that's where the play is, that you link it to real life scenarios. So first you check on the real life assumptions that you're making when you're capturing the data, because data looks very clean. I mean, it'll tell you that these are the categories, but whether that's actually got captured, the process for data capturing, that's where the whole story should start off. And then what questions you are asking on the data, or what hypothesis you are testing out on the population. I think that's where the interesting stuff can really happen on the analytics side. And of course, once those things are happening, you have various tools to do that, whether you're using a reporting tool, or you're using a modeling process, or you're using some statistical analysis process. So those are ways, or those are the hows to how do you solve it. But first the what has to come, and that's when post that the how really flows out.
Yeah. So it's not just the quantity of data, it's the quality of data. I was trying to make a withdrawal of NPS. And I logged on to I have done this exercise 3 times before. I've spent a lot of time and I've reached a dead end. Then I've started again. I waited for a few days, maybe something. So today I realized what the real problem was, and it's very funny. The thing is that I was supposed to upload towards the fag end of that whole process. I'm supposed to upload 4 documents. So one is my identity proof, address proof, one cancel check, and the NPS number card. So I uploaded one, and it told me done. And then after that, it allowed me to close the process. But actually, I had to upload 4. Then when I tried to find out from, not an easy thing, but found out from somebody who knew about it, he told me that it is 4 documents have to be uploaded as one. Now, that's like, I think you have to be really technology advanced to be able to do that, right? So how will you take 4 documents and the front and the back of one also, because it has to be that way. So he gave me a suggestion that you keep all the 4 of them together, then you take a picture and then you upload that. So can you imagine now, I may not be the first person who has faced this problem.
True.
They have lakhs of customers. They would have so many customers would have gone and got stuck at this point and abandoned the process. Yeah. So I myself did it 4 times and we think we are pretty okay. I mean, we understand how things work. So the point is that, sometimes quantity overwhelms the quality.
Absolutely.
And also, how do you substitute, some things which are not available in the form of data? When you say data means a number or a click or something like that. So how does that substitution happen? Because unless someone would have studied this, why it is happening, they'll never be able to, I don't know how they're going to solve the problem.
It's a very interesting point, actually. Maybe I'll split up the question into 2 parts. I think one part is about the process design. When you are digitizing a process, or whether or not you're digitizing any customer facing process, if you're designing the process, what assumptions you're making, what journeys you're covering, and happy journeys versus the not so happy journeys, how are those scenarios being covered? And the other point around, if that information is not available, how do you end up assuming things, or what can one do there? So I think maybe the first one, some initial brief comments that I think it comes down to it comes down to what problems you're trying to solve for the customer there, and what assumptions you're making about the customer's current situation or context. So it comes down to, we talk about customer persona, etc. But effectively what you're trying to do is trying to figure out what is the typical customer going to face as an issue or for at this stage, and then figure out. And a lot of these look very straightforward as a customer, but a lot of times we are also guilty as people who are designing the customer experience or digital experience. How could I miss that out here? I mean, a lot of times. So, and that comes out if there's enough testing, enough discussion happening, enough consumer, consumer tests happening before we go ahead and actually roll out the process. So I think that's the one point. The other one is a lot of times this data are not being available, and I think it depends on various scenarios. What we can end up doing if so typically. In analytics, statistically, we end up looking at that. Okay, if you've got majority of the population covered, and if it's only a minority, then why lose out on the information? You can always make assumptions on the minority of the population.
Yeah.
It's just 5-10% data. But if it's majority of the information is missing, you can't really assume stuff. You just have to end up not using that information and effectively figure out processes. Then the question is not how to use that, how to create data, but the question is how to create a process to capture that data. Or do you have any other surrogates that are available that can help you get some relevant information there? So I think that's a lot of times one ends up doing that. It's true in the credit decisioning space. It's true in
everywhere actually, because these are these are the exceptions. And I think unless whether we are using data, of course data helps in scaling, and when we use data as the raw material in scaling, helps the employees and things like that. But it's also got to do with the fact that the fundamentals remain the same. So the fundamental is that even out of your 100 customers, if one of them is having some kind of a problem, so the understanding or getting into those as we used to call 5 whys, that okay, why could have this been happening? If there's a rejection, then the whys. So basically the fundamentals of how we deal with a process or a customer remain the same. It's just that we sometimes get a little more obsessed with the data that we have. We have this tendency of saying that, oh no, all customers are that way. Maybe they don't understand. They went to some wrong menu and they did something incorrect. As a practitioner and a person who works with data, I think one of the important points is to also have a reality check of how things are, and use the product themselves, because somehow everyone doesn't use the product themselves.
True. So there's a real universe and there's a data universe that comes out. So there's a real universe where, a lot of times you may not end up asking the customer for too many questions, but you're assuming then that, okay, everything that I captured just 5 fields on the first page of the screen and then showed some options to the customer, and customer has done something maybe on the digital journey. But in the reality, when you talk to customers, you figure out, oh, they clicked on this button because they assumed that that's how you're doing it. So I think that's where the whole play is. And a lot of times we end up wanting to work on clean data, perfect data, but we end up restricting ourselves. So it has to be a little bit dirty, a little bit mix of the real and the data universe.
That's very important, because we sit in our rooms and do all the work, and then when you actually go down on the ground, the story is different. And sometimes surprisingly, the customers using our product in a much more advanced way than we ever even thought about.
That's always the case. A lot of times customers end up giving suggestions. Absolutely.
Yeah, especially the mobile. Tell me, we, all this discussion that we're having is more about the larger companies, who have a data warehouse, who have all ways of capturing data. So just tell me, in your experience and of what you know, how do the smaller companies, see, I can imagine the new ones, of course, they start off on a, platform which has all that we require. But what happens to the smaller companies? Are they in any position to use data, or is it very difficult for them to make use of this kind of analytics?
Absolutely. So I think, so if I've understood you correctly, what you're saying is, if we have, for a smaller organization, what should be the priority to try to get all the data together, or how do we end up approaching the whole problem? Because a larger organization has investments made, they already have, they're investing a lot of time in getting those systems coming together, etc. So how do smaller organizations approach the problem? I think the answer is pick up use cases, pick up areas of impact, and that's where you start off. Areas of impact could be what can help me improve my whatever business decisions that I'm taking, whether it's if you're lending in financial services, you're a lending business or an insurance business or a banking business. Pick up specific areas, start off with use cases, show success there using analytics, whether it is through reports, through data, or through predictive analytics. It depends on the use case, or it could be about customer engagement campaigns. So pick up use cases and solve for those use cases, and that's how you grow. And yes, that may be a little bit dirty initially, because what you're starting off is you're not building the whole framework at the start, but what you're ensuring is that whatever analytics is happening, it's showing some return, and that's what you're using to build the next level of aggregation of information, and also next level of data infrastructure that is needed. So for a smaller company, that's the way at least that I would think would make sense, because the uh, whole advantage of a smaller company is that there is agility, and it's not about the large scale of investments, it's about the agility that you can bring in. And that's what you're trying to do in other functions, whether it's sales, whether it's through sales through offline or online channels, or through servicing. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to bring in agility and differentiate there. So that's what you should do in analytics also.
See, the other question that's coming to my mind is, and now because I also knew Experian, and that's when we started. So we were using data. One is, of course, to bring together, also customer information, but to prevent frauds, to to basically secure the system in a way. So that if somebody has made multiple applications, or if somebody is already in a negative list, it is one of the ways in which we were, which data is used for fraud prevention particularly. Of course, data is used for making sales, so the cross selling, as well as fresh acquisition of customers. Which are the areas of customer service where data is used? Because even when people call us, even today, they talk about, oh, do you want to invest, do you have surplus funds? I don't know, I mean, of real cases where this information is used to really serve the customer.
True. So I think if specifically for customer service, whether it's various channels that we're talking about, I think a lot of valuable information can come through in terms of understanding what kind of customers. Again, it comes down to questions. So if we pick up questions on the customer side first, and then we pick up on the employee side. For the customer side, what kind of queries are coming up? What customer cohorts are bringing up those queries? Is there something fundamentally going wrong in those customer cohorts? That's why those queries are coming up. So that a lot of analysis can happen there. So which means effectively, first need to have a clear way of capturing the data, and at least being able to summarize it for some analysis to happen there. So I think that's where the customer analysis starts off. And then on the basis of that, you start taking decisions. So once you've got analysis coming in, you know that, okay, that's what's happening, and this is not how you want it to happen. That maybe certain set of customer queries should be redirected to some other particular talent set. If it's in the case of call centers, or if it's the case of human interaction, or in the case of a digital journey, you want certain set of customers to actually have this information available, or this service being made available before they go ahead. So that requires action basis that analysis. So I think that's where a lot of action is happening. Very simple examples, chatbots that are coming up. I think some really good platforms. A lot of times we feel that you measure a chatbot by putting it up and then saying that, okay, yes, I'm able to manage so many queries for my customers through that. But management of queries is not the metric. The metric is that how many queries were successfully answered. That's an interesting one. So how do you solve that? How do you know that this query has been successfully answered by the chatbot? Somebody, if I'm interacting with the chatbot, and if the conversation goes ahead and I'm finding the chatbot not being able to answer, so I ask a question that, okay, what is the details of my policy, or I want to know why this particular transaction happened on my account, and the bot says, sorry, I'm not able to answer. And then you are also waiting, bot is also waiting. Then they say, do you have anything else to ask me? And then we say no, and then you say, have a nice day. So is that a successful bot transaction? Maybe not. So there's a lot of good platforms that are coming up. There's a lot of good technology that's coming up that's actually able to track that this was not a successful transaction. A lot of times, a customer asks something, and the bot replies something else. Customer is not happy. They'll walk off. It's an aborted transaction. So where do I count it? So figuring out, so some interesting stuff happening there in terms of how you can automate a lot of this analysis of these queries, and also propose what could be the right answer. So I think that's happening there. So that's one on the bot side. But effectively coming down to what customer cohorts are coming up as questions and how do you manage them, whether it's the digital channel or the physical channel, and what else can be done to take action there. So I think that's something that at least is being seen there. So it's effectively moving ahead from measurement to helping in figuring out the root causes and for taking action. Yeah.
Making it convenient for the customer
Yeah.
as well as I think that convenience portion should get well covered in gathering the data and using it. What I want to ask you is now, since you moved from to different markets, what has been your learning on the other side? That's on the consulting side.
Yeah. So I think that was one of the that was one of the objectives of actually making the previous move and understanding how it's there, because when you work in a large organization, and if you've been able to, or in any organization, and if you've worked there for a reasonable amount of time, you get credibility, and there's an ecosystem that's supporting you. That's why you're staying there. And because of that, a lot of things become smoother, faster to do. But when you move on the sell side, you don't have that time to establish that credibility, to prove yourself and show that credibility. It's just a couple of hours of conversation. And how do you ensure that there is one empathy coming up pretty fast, that yes, this would be something that you're facing as a problem, rather than saying that here's my solution and please take it. So this would be the problem you'll figure out. And how do you judge that you're getting to the right problems that they're facing today? So I think that's been the interesting one to learn for. And of course, I think working on different cultures. So there's a distinct Indian way of working versus different cultures. Not that anything is superior or inferior. It's just about getting to understand how things work in a different setup. So I think that was the interesting one to work for. So if you ask me these two things about establishing credibility and getting to work with folks from different cultures coming together. So I think really, really valuable experience. I think among other things, it told me to slow down in the way I speak, because a lot of times I have a habit of speaking faster, and people from other countries may not be able to understand. So that's something that
it's the accent also which catches up, because I only thought, even when I used to meet people otherwise that there's a Western accent and then there is the Indian accent. But when you realize that people on the East have still another accent. So
Absolutely.
Speaking slowly is one of the ways of communication. Yes.
And how do you establish respect for other professionals in a different culture? There are various ways to do that. In some setups, it's easier to actually bond and share some notes, but otherwise it's slightly different.
Very formal. So we can have another, I think, session around this piece, because
there's always a lot to learn.
There's a lot to learn. Yeah. So now on the other side, you worked for different markets, in different markets, for different markets. So what are the differences that you find, in the way we do things here on the, analytics front?
I think overall, if you ask me, maybe, so I focus more on banking and basically around financial services clients focused in banking and say non-banks, primarily around consumer financial services. So I think the differences, if you ask me in terms of ways of working, that also comes through in terms of what is the context or the environment that they are facing, or what are the problems that they are facing. Couple of things. India has a large opportunity in terms of financial inclusion that's there. So a lot of the action that we are seeing is effectively directed towards digitizing distribution, simplifying for scale, and or then also now we are seeing a lot of opportunities coming up in customizing products for various customer segments. So I think that's the action that's happening there. If you look at some of the countries in Southeast Asia, they may not have that scale, but the problem there to be solved may not be financial inclusion. What they're trying to solve for is getting the right products in, because there may be some opportunity to correct the configuration of products that the customer has ended up taking, maybe too many loans, or maybe too many investment products that they may not be needing. So I think the nature of problems varies, and therefore the approach varies. So the focus may not be to digitize as much, and that's why India is actually taking a lot of leap in terms of moving ahead much faster than a couple of these countries, because the nature of problems being solved is very different. That's one. The other thing is, I think in the way of working, compliance and the regulatory angle is something that was an eye opener, if you ask me. Uh, uh, I had a lot of respect for the regulator before I moved out, and now I've come back. But having worked in various other markets for APAC, I think RBI has done a really great job in terms of the forward-looking stance that has been taken, whether it's around various facets of consumer banking. I'll restrict to consumer banking, but around lending, around payments, around data, that's been there. There are examples of developed countries in Asia today, which don't have a single view of the customer in terms of all loans being available in one place. That's still the case today, because of the way the landscape has developed in that country. Yeah, thanks to the regulator here, we've got that solved 15 years back, and we are seeing the same action. A lot of good work happening now. I've just moved to insurance, and I'm seeing a lot more in terms of data and digitization that's happening in recent months and recent quarters. So it's really very reassuring to figure out that if you're working in any of these in the financial sector here, there is a lot of checks and balances put in place, and there's a lot of good amount of forward thinking that's happening. So a lot of times, a lot of actions that are happening are being driven by the industry also. So that's been something interesting. The other thing around a way of working is obviously the cultural aspect of how people connect, how they respect, they demonstrate respect, and how you get people to open up to share frank feedback. So I think that's the interesting one. It depends on what are the language barriers also a lot of times that one needs to sail through for. But yeah, you establish, if you ask me, while there's a difference there, it comes down to how you establish credibility, whether it's with your own team or with colleagues inside the company or with the clients. It just requires a little bit of more time, saying invested, and at least repeatedly proving that yeah, here we are here to help and we are here for the long term. So I think that's the way it comes out.
You were here, and of course somehow we always thought that maybe because we were working where technology was like far ahead, when you observe around, and plus the regulator speed, so I think we feel that we are far ahead than what most people are. But now, having come back, what are the opportunities that you see here now, in this space?
I think overall, I think still a lot of opportunity around financial inclusion and what can be done and how you can make the cost of delivery of services cheaper, whether it's lending, banking, insurance. And I think a lot of good work happening there, because we've got a lot of industry level action happening. UPI, of course, on the payment side, but also the overall work on the India stack, and also now the insurance stack that's coming up. So I think that's been the big one to solve, and that's the big opportunity, if you ask me. And the other thing I would say is personalization and at scale. I think that's something still I would still say a multi-year or maybe a decade plus kind of a story. Simple examples, right? So maybe 20 years back, 15 years back, if you wanted customized advice on investments, you would want to have a private banker who will require a particular AUM to be there. Even that's even true today. But all that information and the assistance of an advisor can be made available with the intervention of technology today, for giving personalized advice, not only for investments, but it could be for anything. Why not for loans? Why not for insurance if the customer needs it? All customer persona may not want to do a direct to customer journey. They will. A lot of people will still prefer an assisted journey, maybe because of trust levels, maybe because of demographics. But I think that's the big opportunity. So you're figuring out how you can provide personalization at scale with the right mix of assisted or direct to customer kind of customer journey. So I think a lot of opportunity there, really a lot of opportunity there to figure out, because the cost of distribution is coming down because of the use of technology, and a lot of technology getting embedded.
Communication costs also are coming down. Yeah, you're right. So I think we've kind of covered. At least all the questions that I had in my mind have been covered. There's one little bit which is still, going on, and I must ask you this question.
Sure.
We collect a lot of pieces of information. So, there are, say, each channel would collect information of their products. And even though we say everything then goes into a common pool and then everyone works around that, but there are still pockets of information. What percentage of utility that data really has? So I have a feeling that we may just be using about 20 to 30% of what we have, and there's this huge scope of bringing everything together and really making good use of it. What do you think about that?
I think still a lot of opportunity about the data that is getting captured, because a lot of times it comes back down to the tools that are being used. If you ask me, the level of analytics or analysis that was happening maybe 10 years back would have really, if you look at it, what's happening today, the amount of customer information, a lot of times you would not have even imagined that we'll be capturing a lot of those transactions or interactions coming in. As we are moving ahead with technology, you'll be able to customize a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of the information that was coming in was in a particular language. Vernacular is coming up in a big way in India, and that will be the reality for the future. So that's something that's coming up. So a big opportunity there in terms of not only data capture, but what all questions one can answer. A lot of times, you effectively any decision that you are taking, is there something that you can, is there some data available that can help you validate it? Is something that we can start off with. A lot of times you need to start off with your gut, because a lot of times data may not be available, but you have ways and means to do that. The reason that helps out from a journey point of view is that it keeps you grounded. Having data at the end of some initiative or some experiment that you're running helps you actually come back and stand in front of the result and say that, okay, this is what I'd assumed, that this is how customers will behave, but that's not how it happened. And what is the reason for that? I had assumed that this will be the reason, but it's a different reason that's coming out. So how much you're curious and how much you're willing to stand up and actually get yourself questioned on the hypothesis that you bring in. I think that's where the journey is. So there's no really limit per se I would put to how much can happen. But yeah, as long as it's ensuring business impact, it makes sense.
So there's more and more data and more uses of that, and aligning and bringing everything together, because at the end of the day, it is one customer who has given data in various parts. Salil, we've had a really good conversation. Now, is there any message? Is there anything that you would like to tell the listeners? Either, I mean, from any perspective.
I think no particular message, ma'am. I think we are living in an era that where knowledge, there's no limit to the knowledge that one can go after. There's no limit to the technology tools that are available to us. I think we should just all of us should just keep on figuring out our purpose and focusing on learning more how we can contribute better to make the world a better place. That's all I'm saying.
That's a very human message. Yeah, thank you so much, Salil.